Welcome. My name is Amanda Bickerstaff. I am the CEO of and co-founder of AI for Education. We are on a mission to help educators, organizations, education institutions navigate AI responsibly and effectively. So I'm really excited to have you here with Dr. Karen Woodruff, who is a colleague and a friend. This is a really exciting webinar for us because we're both STEM educators. I started my career as a high school biology teacher at a public school in the Bronx, and I actually met Karen about 15 years ago when we worked together at where Karen still is now the leader of. And so we're really excited about today's session. As always, we would love for you to get involved, and thank you for those that are already chatting in the chat. So please introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from, what you do. I see we've got wonderful people already kind of sharing, which is great. This is your peers. These are educators from all over the world that are interested in STEM and AI. So this is a great way for you to share resources and to learn a little bit more, not just from Karen and I today. We also want you to prompt with us. So we have a couple of new prompts for our prompt library that we're going to be sharing, one that Karen created and one that we created. So if you have ChatGPT, we want you to pull it out and go along with us right as we do some prompting. So this is part of I can't believe this is our now 10th webinar we've done over the summer. It's about to not be the summer anymore, so this series is going to need a new name. But we have some ones coming up, which is really great. Dan and our team is going to put this into the chat, but we've got a couple already up, and we'll be putting a few more over the next couple of days. But next week, we'll be creating your own generative AI tools for your classroom with PlayLab, a nonprofit. We'll be doing an all-female panel on navigating AI ethics in your classroom. We'll be looking at preparing students for an AI-powered future, which we'll be talking a little bit about today. And then also doing two pretty strong practical ones, one on running a generative AI PD at your school, and the other on creating a policy, whether you're in the K-12 or higher ed space. So I'm going to come off sharing, and I'm going to hand it over to Karen, who I cannot believe after 15 years of meeting each other. I was a grad student, very early on in my career. Just so happy to have you here. Can you give everybody an introduction to you, the work you do at the Endeavor program, and then talk about your first time prompting?
Yes, thank you so much, Amanda, for having me. It is great to reconnect, and it is unbelievable that it was 15 years ago that we started working together. Amanda and I both were part of a curriculum development team for a program called the NASA Endeavor STEM Teaching Certificate Project, which started with a cooperative agreement with NASA and now has continued beyond that cooperative agreement to have a relationship with the NASA Office of STEM Engagement. And we continue to bring teachers to our program to help support STEM integration across K-12 and beyond. We work in all 50 states and internationally, and we offer an online program, so it's really easy to integrate STEM and NASA STEM resources into your classroom through the program. So I invite you to check that out when we're done, or interact with me in all our social media spaces if I can help you with your integrated STEM questions. But tonight we're talking about our AI and STEM. And this is something that I'm really interested in, both from the perspective of professional learning with educators, as well as supporting pre-service educators, which is sort of the other hat that I wear these days as well. So that's a little bit about my work. Thanks, Amanda. And your first question was about my first interaction, or my first question prompt with ChatGPT, correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I had to think about this a little bit and scroll down through all of my entries. And it was a long list because I've been interacting quite a bit. But in addition to a STEM education, one of the things I'm really passionate about is making sure that the work that we do is equity centered, right? And so when AI first started becoming part of our everyday conversation in education in the spring, right? Very quickly became part of our everyday conversations. I was really interested in how the program would provide information that may have been somewhat controversial or somewhat poorly reported in the media at that time. And I was also really interested in how the program was going to be biased towards certain groups of people or perspectives on STEM education. And so while it is definitely an integral part of the work that we do as STEM educators, my initial prompt wasn't about writing a STEM lesson. It wasn't about a specific STEM topic. I actually asked it two questions. First, I wanted to know how well it would write a fifth grade paper on Indigenous peoples of North America, right? So I put in a prompt, and I was an early user at the time, so I probably didn't do it quite right, but I was able to get a good indication of what the program was able to share on that topic. And the second one, the prompt that I asked was about George Floyd and the media attention around George Floyd. And I read the two prompts, and I was actually really impressed with how non-biased the responses were. And so from there, I started to sort of put in other things that I was working on and interested in at that time. And of course, have continued to use it as a tool in my STEM teaching and in my professional development and my work with pre-service teachers who are entering the profession, needing to know how to use AI in a responsible way in their classrooms.
That's great. And I think thinking back to when we first met, we worked with a NASA program, but I don't know if you remember, but we were doing like this big project where I was going to schools around the country looking at their program. And we went to Oklahoma, and they were very disappointed when I wasn't actually from NASA, but not too disappointed to have called the news. And so I ended up on the 10 o'clock news with Carlos Bito, who we worked with. And I think that, it was very funny, but also I think people were absolutely a little bit disappointed that it was just Amanda Bickerstaff, STEM teacher, and not like NASA astronaut. But it is pretty great to have done this work together. And it's always been something that, our passion around like really true STEM of actually looking at interdisciplinary work, but also what you just said about like equity and bias is really important, because a lot of our fields, like STEM, is not something that works without bringing together a lot of different perspectives and really teaching people to be critical about the world around them in meaningful ways. And so I think it's amazing that you actually took that on in your first prompt. And what is interesting, though, is that George Floyd, you saw that it was very measured, but we know that these systems are extremely biased. And so, most likely that was something that was tagged in the training to like be careful about what the answer was. But there are significantly other ways in which bias really, comes through, including at the very early stages of these tools. If you asked it who was a doctor, who was a nurse, I would say that a doctor was male and a nurse was female. And if you do that right now in some of these text to image tools, it will say that the majority of doctors are men, and the majority of nurses are women, but disproportionately. So I think this is something that, while it didn't do it for you, like it does do it in a lot of ways, and something that we need to be cautious about. So starting with a little bit of like the bias question, which is great. But now let's actually go into, what are you most excited? What capability? You're a STEM teacher. This is a STEM advancement that is so amazing and so much earlier than we thought. Like, what are you most excited about? What is the capability that you think is most exciting for STEM teaching?
Over the last several years, with the pandemic, with a lot of conversation about access to technology across school districts, I think that one of the things that's most interesting to me and exciting to me with AI is increasing access, increasing collaboration across even just educators, right? I think about when I started teaching, a few years ago now, and I felt very much like I was in my own siloed classroom. And, fast forward 20 years, and we have this real collaborative community, almost to the extent where like you're bombarded. If you go online and you look for something, you're bombarded with information, and you're having to sort of sit back and say, okay, what's good quality STEM content and what's not. And so I think that one of the things that, and while I'm cautious about it, one of the things I'm optimistic about is that ability to continue to collaborate in meaningful ways with these tools, and to provide students and school districts greater access to technology and collaboration than they've had in the past.
That's great. Yeah, I think that it's really exciting because, STEM has been considered like computational thinking is not, it's something that we can teach, but it's not for everyone, right? Like it can be quite difficult when you have students that struggle with that. And what we've done is we've ripped that apart where you don't need to understand syntax and if then statements, but you can learn how to prompt with this natural language. And so what we can do now is you can still do like data science now. You can do creation of a front end of a website. You can do programs. You can create games using a combination of natural language and refinement with prompt engineering. And I think that that's what gets so exciting, because now everyone can be a STEM engineer. Like literally all of us, there's no excuse now that we can't teach every teacher. No, there's no teacher out there that said, I don't know enough, or, enough students that I haven't done enough, but you can actually go in there and start to create and not just create, but share these amazing new tools, and there'll be better and better opportunities as the field develops, which is just something that I think is just going to be super cool.
The other thing that's really interesting around the access conversation is the ability for assistive technology to continue to innovate and meet students' needs. The personalized learning capabilities of artificial intelligence are really interesting.
Yeah, I get really excited about like what we're going to see in the next like 12 months. And I see Shirley talk. I just want to say Jennifer said at least she doesn't have to define STEM what it is anymore. That made me laugh, Jennifer. I mean, we were like OGs too. Like Karen and I have been doing this for a long time, and it definitely wasn't something that people knew. And then also I think that the question is like, we have a question around like what are people using, and this is where it gets really interesting. I think that right now there's real questions around what are the appropriate tools. And I know that we focus a lot around the idea that like the free tools are probably what you need to work with right now because the foundational models have flaws. And so, but I know that there are a lot of great solutions, and they're going to be even more and more as we go forward. And so my next question for you, Karen, is like, how is generative AI set to change how we teach STEM? Like, how will it change the way we teach STEM?
Well, I'll give you an example. In the Endeavor program, a lot of teachers come to us and they're really just looking for creative and engaging ways to integrate across content areas, right? So because we work with the Office of STEM Engagement with NASA, we use a lot of NASA mission data and just NASA engagement to excite students about STEM. And that can be anything from physical education. NASA has a great physical education program where students are training like an astronaut, which works really well in the elementary through middle school grades. Everything from that into really doing high level coding and robotics. And so with the NASA Endeavor program, if a teacher comes to us and they say, I'm really struggling with coming up with ways to engage my students. I live in a rural community. We're not near a NASA center. It might not be the most interesting thing to my students. How can I be culturally relevant, hook my students in and something that's going to really engage with their everyday lives? And so I think that one of the ways that we can use these tools is just to like spark creativity and imagination. I mean, everybody who teaches all day long, most of probably educators on this call, you're exhausted by the end of the day, right? You've been working with kids all day, you've been putting your all in, giving them everything you have to be there for them. And it's so important that the work that we all do. And to come up with, that next really awesome lesson plan that integrates across math and science and engineering and all these things we want to do in the STEM classroom is hard work, right? And so if we can use a tool to say, hey, I really want to do this thing, I really want to have this idea, and you plug it into a tool like ChatGPT, just to use it as a brainstorming and kind of initial writing kind of tool, I think is really exciting. And so, yeah, so with the Endeavor program, I anticipate, well, we have started to integrate it. It is relatively still pretty new, right? And so we're continue to think about ways that we can encourage our participants, our educators, to come to the program and not only continue to do that great work with integrated STEM, but to use these tools to be more innovative and more creative in their work.
That's great. Yeah, I think that, I remember, so, I was a science teacher. I was a baby science teacher. and in a high complexity, low income area. And, I think a lot about what you said, like I had nothing left sometimes to do the extra stuff, right? And so a lot of times I didn't do STEM, let's be honest. What I did is I did living environment, and that's all I could do. And that's all I had the space for, even though I wanted to bring in like careers and ways to make it more creative. And I know that my students love to act out and to do, like drawing. I will say I did make my students do a mitosis and meiosis dance collaboration, which I'm not really sure anyone really enjoyed, but I enjoyed. But I think that there are real opportunities to like lean into that interdisciplinary, that extra step of cultural relevance was really great. And for me, like I think I'm most excited about the fact that like legitimately there are going to be these new tools in which coding becomes easier. So, it can be quite hard to debug code in a group of like 35 students. Or robotics, right? Like where you have the one piece of syntax that's just breaking it and students get discouraged, no lack of their own, right? It's just a piece that like, a great coder would have trouble with, but in a different like context, is that the ability for these tools to co-code, to be a pair programming, to be able to do this where like you can get suggestions on your code, you can learn how to move Python to R, or you can learn how to take what you've learned about one language to JavaScript, or like all of these different things. Or I can lean into my design and create a front end in Figma without using any coding, and then I can share that with my partner that really loves back end or can help me pixel push. Like there's just so many cool things that are made possible, and we actually see the rate of development of just not generative AI, but just like engineering has been like on a rocket ship because of these paired programming opportunities and the ability to like really get supportive, targeted feedback about how to improve the building of things with STEM, which I think is just pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned engineering design. One of the things that we really make sure to do in STEM education with engineering activities is to make sure that you're teaching the math and science content, or the content behind the activity. It's not just an arts and crafts project, right? So if you're looking for a really meaningful STEM activity, and let's say you're handed some materials in the district and you don't really know what to do with them, that's a great way to say, hey, I really want to make sure I get this physical science content standard taught in my classroom, and I've been asked to do engineering design. I'm exhausted. I don't know, at the end of the day, like, help me out here. Where can I get started? And of course, you're not copying and pasting anything. You're just using it as a collaborative tool to get some ideas flowing.
That is a perfect segue to the interactive part of our session. And I just want to say thank you, everybody. All these ladies in STEM, not that they're not great men out there listening as well, but the ladies in STEM are blowing up the chat, which I love.
Look
And
at
so keep
that.
it up. But what I want to see is we're actually going to do some live prompt engineering. So we're going to do two prompts. Karen's going to do one, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the art of prompt engineering and do a second prompt. But we're going to go to our prompt library now. If you've seen it before, this is a great place to get started. So Karen, you wanna share your screen?
You bet. All right, so I am on the website here, and I'll just start at the prompt library, right? So everyone can see where we're going. So this is Amanda's amazing prompt library, and I'm on the third row down here, right in the middle. It's called a multidisciplinary unit plan. So that's where I'm going to click, and you can see the example of the prompt that we're going to work with today. So this is set up to allow ChatGPT to really understand the context, right? So we say, you are an expert STEM educator in a specific grade level classroom. We want the program to develop an interdisciplinary unit for a specific grade level that integrates the series of standards, perhaps. And then the unit should be a certain number of days. Each lesson should be a certain number of minutes long. Create an outline for a lesson plan that utilizes a specific framework, and then make sure that you include objectives and materials and all of those good things. So here's an example prompt. So I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to plug it into ChatGPT.
So just for those that are getting started with ChatGPT, every time that so GPT remembers you within a context window, which is what this is called. And so you can really interact within this window. So it's always important to open a new window when you're kind of going to do a deep dive, because it won't have a ton of memory, but it'll have enough definitely to build that unit. So great. So Karen, can you is it possible to make your screen slightly bigger? I'm not sure if that's possible. Yeah, great.
Okay, that did the trick. That's great. Oh, let me turn that off. All right. So what it's done here is it's taken our prompt and given the title Interdisciplinary Unit, Exploring Proportional Relationships and Kinetic Energy. Because what I asked it to do, if we scroll up here a little bit, is take this standard, an 8th grade math standard, graph proportional relationships, interpreting the unit rate as the slope of the graph, compare 2 different proportional relationships represented in different ways. And this physical science standard also for middle school, construct and interpret graphical analysis of data to describe the relationships of kinetic energy to the mass of an object and the speed of an object. And I asked it for my physical science class, the unit should be 5 days long. Each unit should be about 45 minutes. Please create an outline for each lesson plan that utilizes the 5E instructional model, which we really like very much at the Endeavor program because it's very inquiry-based and student-centered. And so the unit plan objectives should be included, any materials needed, formative assessments, and a final project. And so you can see what it has produced for us. So here are some unit objectives. Now I'm looking at these and I may want to tweak these a little bit because I know my depths of knowledge, language, or I want to make sure that they're measurable. So I can take a look at those and use those as initial ideas and maybe tweak them a little bit. But it's done a pretty good job of giving me some unit objectives that are appropriate for 8th grade. And then I have day 1, the engage. And if you're familiar with the 5E lesson plan model, you start with an engage, then you do an explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And so the program has actually recognized that, understands the 5E model. And here we have an outline for day 1. So it's suggesting that we engage students by beginning with a short video and a real life scenario and illustrating proportional relationships, right? We may like that idea. Explore some of the concepts around proportional relationships and how to identify them. Define unit rate, right? How it's related to slope. So you can see already that the math is here. We're looking at the explore part where we're going to bring in proportional relationships with the physics concepts as well. There's an activity suggested, and then the explain, the kinetic energy and mass piece rather, and that's where you can see that it even cited the standard for us. Defining kinetic energy, explaining the formula. And again, like these are great ways to get started. I might actually like rearrange this a little bit or do things a little bit differently, bring in some of my favorite activities from teaching for several years, or prompt it to make a few changes for me. So for example, I mentioned earlier that our program is really integrated with NASA missions, NASA data, using NASA as an engaging context for teaching STEM. And so I might actually want to ask ask ChatGPT to elaborate on this lesson outline by asking the program to integrate a NASA mission. So if I just scroll down here and you can continue to read and see all of the good details it's given me, I might actually ask for suggestions for the final project to also include a NASA mission. Okay? So I can say, enhance the final project by integrating NASA mission. And I haven't told it which one, so let's just take a look and see what happens here. It's going to continue to build out the whole thing again, but you can see that there's some NASA integrated in here. So a NASA mission briefing, perhaps in the 5th day in the evaluate, right? Provide students with a brief overview of a NASA Mars mission, explaining the challenges of the launch and landing due to differences in gravity between Earth and Mars, and that's where they'd be using their math concept. Maybe they're doing a roller coaster design. There's a NASA integration discussion here. And I can get even more specific and say, hey, why don't you give me some information on the NASA Insight mission, right? That's what I'm really interested in integrating here. And so I can continue to prompt ChatGPT to be more specific with what it is that I'm looking for.
That is great. And I love that like this is something in which you're showing kind of how you keep building. And I think some of it also as you're getting started, like it's okay to like, you know, test it a bit too. Cause like maybe you want this unit plan, but you're gonna say, I'm not sure that this is the right, like, I don't know if my kids are gonna be so that down for like proportional, you know, relationships and kinetic energy. I want to do something different. Give me like 4 other versions that fit for this piece, or let's make this more relevant to my students that are interested in design or architecture or athletics. And I think that this is where you can really start to get creative with your outputs. So if you want to come off sharing, Karen, I'm going to show, and thank you guys for not only coming along with us, but sharing your insights as well. I'm going to share my screen as well. I'm just going to do that for a moment because what we're going to do is actually today we launched a new resource. If you're familiar with us, we are putting out a lot of stuff pretty quickly, and thank you, Dan, from my team for helping make this beautiful. This is like a model that you can use when you're thinking about prompting, and so we had really good questions. So I know that Lisa asked a question because when she entered the same prompt, she didn't get timing, Karen. She didn't get timing on the different sections. And like I said in the chat, that's due to something called temperature. So temperature and hallucinations when are hand in hand. When a chatbot gives you variation or creativity, it also is why it hallucinates or makes up stuff because it doesn't want to, like if you asked it for give me 5 lesson plan ideas for science classroom, it get pretty boring fast if it just gave you the same 5 ideas every time. And there are tools that have a very low temperature where you'll always get the same output or very similar. But ChatGPT, I think, is usually around a 70%. So that's a very, very high temperature with a lot of variation. So what we suggest is like you have to really think about how you prompt because it's not going to, first of all, make stuff up. Second of all, it doesn't always have consistent outputs. And it doesn't always know what you want because it's a predictive engine. So what we have here is our 5S framework. And this is actually designed based on how we built our prompts. So when I worked with Karen, we actually refined her prompts by adding a bit more detail. And this is how we did it. The first is you set the scene. And so there are now the ability to put custom instructions into ChatGPT where if you always want it to be an instructional designer for a STEM classroom that knows everything about the 5E model and uses Common Core state standards, you can prep that. But a lot of us use it for different things. Like we might use it to do a travel itinerary, or we're going to do it to do our own kind of personal work. So what we suggest is you always set the scene and tell the tool what you want it to do. So in this case, you're an expert STEM instructional designer and teacher, and that's how I lead in and prime the chatbot. The second is be specific. So the more specific you are, including, let's say, including timing, the better the outcome is going to be. So we are using the 5E model to create a 60-minute hands-on lesson, and I go down the pace, but I want to be as specific as possible. And this might be that I do a prompt and I'm not specific enough, and then I redo the prompt so that I have one that works better going forward. The next is to simplify your language. You do not need to spend 20 minutes writing a prompt. Please, everyone, I'd rather you spend 20 seconds writing a prompt that's not very good, getting output and then refining that output than spending 20 minutes writing or 10 minutes writing the best prompt with the right jargon, finding the standard, etc. Better to do low jargon and very simple, and then work with the chatbot. And if it's not giving you what you want, you keep working with it and providing more information. But I do not suggest trying to like, you know, make this the best possible version at the start. It's really about refining. The next is to structure the output. So like we said, 5E model, but you can have a rubric in a table or a chart, or you can have it in a list. You can have it in bullets. You can have it like with headings. If you do that, then the output is going to be much easier to use. And it's also, it gives the chatbot the structure you want to work within. But then I think the most important thing you can do is share your feedback. Okay. It's not going to be perfect. It will never be a final draft. It is generative AI. It's a predictive engine. It is a great brainstorming partner or thought partner, but it will never give you what you want fully the first time, especially since we know how complex it is to create good stuff for our classrooms. So provide that feedback. And Karen did a beautiful job of doing that. she was like, okay, give me a mission. Okay, it didn't give me the mission I want. I'm going to keep going back to it. But then what I'm going to do though is I'm going to take this and refine it. And then I'm going to have a really good draft that I can now pull in and say, okay, this is what my model is going to, this is what the unit's going to be about. Here's what I'm going to think about with what I need to build out. And then I'm going to take it apart and I'm going to build this out and actually, talk to my colleagues, or I'm going to look at my own, resources I've already had, or I'm going to look at the NASA Endeavor program for some of these great mission data to add in. And I think that that's really where we see a lot of the value. So, we really, really hope that this is going to be something that is like very helpful for you. And we actually have the one that I built today with Callie on our team's help, is one that's very close to my heart, which is is the science demos. And I've already told Karen this, but as a baby teacher, I taught in the Bronx at a low-income school where I didn't have a classroom. So I had 5 classrooms, and I was so intent on it being a good experience that I decided to do a hands-on demo of pH. And so my grandfather at the time sat with me. We made red cabbage indicator. We got all the different pH scale. I had Pepto-Bismol and I had lemon juice. And I literally had a little cart, and I went from classroom to classroom doing this work, showing the different colors, pouring out the alkalides into the water fountain because we had no sink. And I don't know if kids actually cared, to be honest. 9th grade students can be pretty hard. But I think about this a lot because I kind of got discouraged from doing this because it was too much. I was doing too much. And instead of sometimes what we can put ourselves into is this, it has to be perfect as science teachers or STEM teachers. When a lot of times you can find a much simpler way to do this. So we built this very simple prompt engine or prompt for our prompt library about how to actually build some of these science class demonstrations. And so you'll see we primed it, we set the scene like we talked about. It's structured, it's simple, and we have this example of a 10th grade chemistry class. So what we're going to do, and another format of our piece is you can always make this work for you. This is really just meant to be a starting place. You can also use other chatbots. So I'm going to go to my ChatGPT, and what you're going to see is that I do a lot of these sessions all the time. So you'll see we have a lot of this. In fact, this is what I use to help refine the prompt that we just shared with you. I'm going to create a new prompt window. I'm going to put this in, and it's going to have your, all these pieces, 10th grade chemistry. And what we're going to see is it's going to give us some material. So chemistry, which is really cool. So we're going to be talking about cohesion, adhesion, and so the properties of water. It's got quite a few things, which is pretty cool. And then it gives me how to do this. So here are the demo steps, how we're going to do this. And this is a full demo. So I'm actually going to say I want a version of this demo with less materials because I don't have a classroom. So I want to be able to carry it to see. And what you're going to see is it's really collapsed it. So now it's a similar approach, but now I'm doing work with much less. So now I only have to have water, food coloring, some small pieces of paper or paper clips. And so it starts to see how I can do this. You can also use it to say, I want 5 more examples of science demos that are only 10 minutes. So, I'm going to start to play with this and then say, okay, so I have elephant toothpaste. That sounds really fun. This is what I guess elephants, this is what we use for elephants to do their toothpaste. I think that's awesome. I want to do that. Balloon and candle, bending light, static electricity. Oh my gosh, Karen. This is it heard me talking.
I think you need to try the elephant toothpaste activity because you're gonna love it.
I don't know. I think it sounds pretty cool, but what we can do, and the more we can get more specific. I was pretty broad in this. It's all in around chemistry and in physics, but you can see it kind of moves in and out. And so, but what's really awesome, or I think is really awesome, is that I wouldn't have a lot of time to think about this. And so how can I use ChatGPT to inspire me? I want to understand elephant toothpaste. I do not teach STEM anymore, but I'm ready to do it. And I think that really can be really, fantastic for us as we think about building for tools for the classroom. But then also let's think about what a student seeing that, wouldn't they be absolutely floored about like what is happening here? Like, how is it going? And I think that this is so interesting as like we are as STEM educators, it's our job to make the world come to life, right? It is like more than anything, I think, and maybe I'm biased because we're STEM educators, but I do believe that our job is to like inspire people to want to know more about how things work and how our world works, and also how we can make it better. And so if I'm getting that excited, like imagine if you could really bring this into students and they can start seeing the power as well. And I will stop. I will not do elephant toothpaste right now.
Definitely send us pictures when you do. We want to see them. So
I'm ready.
yeah, Amanda, I really love that that infographic you shared with us with the different steps to creating prompts. It saves everyone so much time and is a guide for getting into this and really using ChatGPT and other AI tools as a collaborator, as you said. So I appreciate all of those tools and guides that you've shared with us in your amazing work that you're doing, you and your
So
team.
oh, thank you so much. Okay, so now we're talking. So we've seen the power, we're doing it. I love the conversation. And anybody that worked in, New York City, like Simreen, you feel my pain. You understand what it meant to walk from classroom to classroom looking like a crazy person. But I really want to talk now about, we've talked about the power for teachers, but like, how are you thinking about the idea of building students' AI literacy so they see the power too?
Yeah, so you're posing that question to me or the group here?
Yes. Yeah, well, also the group, but also to you.
Power of AI. Yeah, I was actually like got caught up in the great chat that was going on there. So, um, gosh, there are so many different ways that I think that we're going to see AI help us as educators, not just the things that we've already talked about, but thinking about ways that we can, and I come back to this a lot because I'm so passionate about making sure that all students have access to STEM, but thinking about ways that we can engage students that have different experiences than we do as educators. We bring ourselves to the classroom every day. We bring our own identities, our own cultural experiences, the things that we're passionate about, but that may not directly align with the students that are sitting in front of us. And so to make sure that we think about ways to make sure that STEM ideas are represented in a variety of different ways. And again, being careful about the biases that may come through in some of these tools and being critical users of this technology. Making sure that students have access as we continue to solve some of those access problems with technology in districts to these creative tools so that they can be, again, critical consumers and users of these tools as well. And as I continue to use it in a variety of different spaces, from pre-service to veteran teachers, I do see it as a way to get the creative juices flowing, allow us to be efficient in our days, because, teacher burnout is a thing, right, guys? Like, we understand that this is hard work and we're all in it for the kids. And, we want to bring our best to the classroom every day, whatever that classroom looks like. And so making sure that we use these tools to be more efficient in our work, whether it's writing rubrics like you've alluded to many times, Amanda, or just coming up with creative ways to do that engineering design challenge in with a new twist or with a new context. I think that's the thing that really gets me most excited about the use of these tools. There are definitely going to be challenges, and there's going to be things that we don't know that are going to come up as we continue to see tools and programs be developed and used widely. But I think as long as we're, again, critical users of it and make sure that we continue to use our own brains and not rely entirely on the programs, that will be okay, right? I'm cautiously excited, I guess, is the right way to characterize the future of AI as far as I see it.
Yeah, we call it responsibly optimistic, which
Sure.
Rachel Arthur in the UK helped me come up with that. And the reason why I think you hit on a bunch of things is that there is the ability for this to open up like worlds, right? And, I still remember when I taught the first living environment Regents exam, students absolutely didn't understand that a dove was a bird. And a whole question on the Regents exam was about doves. And for them, birds are pigeons. And so they missed that, not because they didn't understand the underlying principle of what they were doing, but because it wasn't culturally relevant. But at the other end, like I see it in the piece Tina's just said, like this is not a thinking, like generative AI does not think, it predicts. And so it will predict what is, like, in some cases going to do a very good job because there's so much out in the training data of the internet that it can do 2 + 2 = 4 with some, with a degree of like 100% accuracy. But in reality, this is not thinking, it is computing, but it is presented in a way as if it is thinking. And so we have to be extremely, extremely thoughtful about how students are not to look at this as the end all be all, the same way we just talked about it with you. It's not a final draft. And if it doesn't know, like, you can really, ask it to do a mnemonic device, ask it to do a complex word problem, ask it to do what you said about filling up jugs or something that requires, like, thinking, ask it to do a complex math problem, not even a word problem, just a math problem. And what you're going to see is it can't do that. And but it won't say that it's wrong. It'll give you a hallucination that's like, I'm definitely right. And so we have to be very careful. But what I think is great is that we lean into STEM as a critical eye towards the world, is that students, if they tell them this is how it works, how do the students now have to prove, they have the proof of, like, go out, the burden of proof, and tell me it's real. It looks real. Is it real? How are you going to figure that out? Are you going to talk to an expert? Are you going to do it on your own? Are you going to come to me? Are you going to collaborate? But what are you going to do and actually put it back to the students? And I think that that is a way that we can really, again, push forward like what it means to be a STEM, thinker, into how they even interact with the tool. So we're coming up on time. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to add to that just quickly. Samarine is asking in the chat about pre-service, and I think it relates to anybody who's teaching students, pre-service or veteran. I see a lot of dialogue on social media about not using these tools and just banning them, right? Which is starting to go by the wayside, but initially was sort of a response to all of this, right? And I think, and I teach my pre-service students, I want them to see and be ready for what their students are going to be potentially be trying to use in the classroom. And so I tell them to use it in certain assignments. I tell them to use it to lesson plan. We're going to use it now. We're not going to use it now, right? And we're going to do it intentionally in 2 different ways. And so I think it's important to confront it and address it and use it as a tool. But again, to be careful about it and to recognize that it's not going anywhere. So happy to chat with you more about that. That's a really interesting idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna put up our I'm gonna put up our the presentation again for a moment, because both Karen and I are like super happy to talk to everybody. I'm a very like very open to having conversation. So please feel free to like reach out to us. We're going to go to the hour. So if you want to stay and hang out with us, please put some questions into the chat, the Q&A, and so that we can start to put some answers in. But please, like, I saw everyone sharing LinkedIn, which is super cool, but like, hang out with us too. We're here to help and have a conversation. You can do the Endeavor program. You can hang out with me. But if you have any questions, please feel free to like start asking them. We'll give everyone a moment. But one of the things that is interesting that I think has kind of come up multiple times is this idea of it's not going away. And I think that we have to be very, very realistic. And thank you for everyone that has to go, but we really appreciate it. We'll share the recording tomorrow. But we have to be realistic that ChatGPT, Claude, Bard, Bing, etc., are designed to make money. And they are making money, and they are making money across many different aspects of our lives, in industry, in classrooms. Even like people are paying for all kinds of tools already. I saw Curipod and a couple others out there. But I think that this is really, okay, sorry, Angela. Dan, do you mind putting our LinkedIn's in the chat if you know? Oh, sure, he already did it. He's amazing. But I think that this is a thing, is that this is not going away. Not only is it not going away, but it is going to be part of every part of our life. It's going to be in Instagram and Google Drive. It's going to be in your Gmail, your Microsoft. It's going to be in your fridge potentially. It's going to be literally everywhere. And the problem, though, one of the biggest problems is that this is the worst it will ever be. And actually, these foundational models are very, very unreliable, biased, and they hallucinate, right? And so, how do we teach people that this isn't going away, but there are extreme risks to embracing it fully right now? I mean, do you have any ideas about that, Karen?
Um, I think just leaning on sort of what we've talked about, and I see a lot of conversation in the chat about not banning. I want to make sure nobody heard me say that we should be banning ChatGPT. I definitely did not say that. I want to make sure that, you know, we embrace what's happening, and again, like this whole idea of just being critical users. Amanda, repeat the end of your last question for me.
The question is like, how do we, knowing that the tools are not fit for purpose yet, but are very important and they're going to be a part of every part of our life, like how do we talk about it with like the idea of responsible, optimistic, but not just fully embracing?
Well, I watch even my own kids, right? I have teenage kids in my house, watching all kinds of media, right? So, and I'm usually trying to get them away from it, but like there's a lot to be critical about, and this is one of those things to add to the list, right? So if somebody's watching something on TikTok or on a YouTube short or on you name it, and they just take that for truth, right? Then we're not teaching our students how to be critical consumers of information, data, technology, media, whatever it is that they're getting. And so I think we need to add ChatGPT and other AI tools to that list and really lean on the digital citizenship and digital responsibility curriculum and instruction across content areas integrated in our STEM lessons so that students really think about what's in front of them, right? And from whatever source that comes from. I think that's really a key component of the way we educate our students these days. And you know, this is just another source of information.
Yeah, and we talk about the two things that we think are most important. One is you have a policy about actually how you're using, like what's responsible use mean, and that doesn't mean just for students, but it also means for like leaders and teachers, like normalize that you use it so that it is just another source. But I think the other thing is like we believe very strongly that every single person should have at least a baseline of digital AI literacy, regardless of who you are, including parents. It's just like do an hour. We have a free course, take our course. It's why it's in there. Like, you know, do what you need to do. But like every single person needs to understand that's just if that's computing, not thinking. It's built on the internet. This is how it works. These are the limitations and capabilities. And this is how you can use it responsibly. If we don't have that, then we're not going to have this ability to actually have the critical discussions that are necessary that we're talking about right now. And so things like Brian brought up, you know, ChatGPT like stops at 2021 3.5 and 2022 for 4. You know, you have issues where it's not connected to the internet, but it will give you a URL if you ask it nicely. You know, these are things that that's kind of that level of nuance that's down below, right? Because what'll happen is you can say, is Taylor Swift on tour to ChatGPT 3.5? And it might say yes, but it doesn't mean that it knows she's on tour. It's a guess. It's a predictive guess because maybe a lot of people asked it. And so I think it's just really important for us to think about like what does it actually mean to build AI literacy as not just teachers or students or staff, but like as a society. Like I think it is a non-negotiable. We never did a social media training, we never did an internet training, but I think that right now, if the US government and the government should be like every single person needs to do at least an hour on this thing because I just think it's just so important.
Yeah, I
Okay.
completely agree with that. Thanks, Amanda.
Okay, so we have Tony wants to do the Endeavor program. So we'll definitely put some stuff in the follow-up email and you should totally do it. It was like 15 years ago that I was part of it, but I know it's really great and like to have Karen and her team working on it's pretty cool. But I also see from Lisa about the idea of like visual art, like you know, how do we use these tools to actually start to like have like deeper understandings of things? And I think for me, like if you want to do research on like artists and generating ideas for artworks. Like things like, Bing, for example, which is GPT-4 plus internet search, could be really great. Like I'm so you can say I'm really, really inspired by X. Like help me see other things I could do. And that's a way I think that can be really great. I think it can get a little bit tricky if you're just using like GPT 3.5, which is a closed system, because it could make stuff up. It could actually make up a complete artist or an artwork. Like it'd say, oh, I love artwork, I'm really into Monet, and it could, but I really like X. And it'd be like, yeah, Monet did a Cubist art piece and Monet didn't do that, because it's again predicting. But I think that that's where you have to kind of navigate what the tools are that you want to use. Awesome. Okay. I think if anybody else have any questions, we're going to actually end up, I think, with just one more question that I had for Karen that we didn't get to, which is, how is STEM going to change in the world? Like, what is STEM, like, what are STEM careers going to look like in 2 to 5 years?
Well, I think that everybody who wants to be in a STEM career needs to do exactly what you just said, and is to be literate in artificial intelligence tools, right? And we are starting to see this kind of widely talked about on people's blogs and different quick news articles and social media feeds where people are saying something along those lines, right? If you want to be employable in the future, then learn how to use AI. And, I think some of it is just to get a good click or a like or something like that. But there's some important information there. There's an important message there. And it goes along with what you just were talking about, or along the lines of really needing to be well-versed, whether you're a parent, an educator, or a citizen with a job where you don't think you're going to need AI in the future. You will, right? You will need to understand how the program is providing information, what are the sources of information, what are the potential biases, what are the ways that you need to be a critical user of it. And then the creative side, like, okay, so all those things I understand now, how can I use it to enhance the work that I do? And we don't really even know yet, right, what the capabilities are. That's kind of the exciting part of all of this. Is to understand what the future may hold for being innovative and being creative and solving some of our most challenging problems. For example, I did a lot of work in climate change education, right? And so thinking about taking on some of our really challenging problems with respect to mitigating and drawing down carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. How can AI potentially help us think innovatively and creatively about some of those challenges? And so I think those are the questions that we don't have direct answers to yet, but I'm really encouraged by the positive uses of these tools. And I think everything that you've alluded to here about just becoming aware of the tools, becoming aware of their uses, trying to stay up on all the new things that are to a certain extent, all the new things that are coming out on a regular basis, understanding that they're sort of all built on the same foundation of the technology is an important thing to make sure that we integrate into our schools. And I know that you have some fantastic resources with AI for education that I hope the districts take advantage of this year and in the future, as we think about ways to really responsibly and meaningfully integrate this into our curriculum.
Yeah, no, I agree on so many points. I think there's just this new axiom that like AI is not going to replace your jobs, but people that use AI will. And I think that's actually not entirely true. I think both of those things are true. I think AI will replace jobs. I think we have to be very, very aware of this, is that AI will replace jobs. It will replace jobs that do a lot of this generative work. Like, so we know that there are certain types of work that like copywriting, research, development of social media, like there's all kinds of like pieces, customer service, et cetera, that are real at risk of being degraded or downgraded completely. And that we're going to see, so the McKinsey report says about 40% of jobs will be eliminated, and 80% of those jobs most likely will be jobs that are held by women or people of color. And this is coming for a lot of us, a lot of people that have white collar jobs. And so there's that. And then there's also the point that people that are trained early on prompt engineering, that understand how these things work, are going to have a leg up pretty quickly. And those that take advantage to create are going to even have a bigger leg up. So the ones that, like, if you have an idea for a website, like, or a idea or some kind of game or something that could be really helpful, or even a teaching tool, you're going to have a significant advancement and way to get ahead of those people. But we have to be incredibly cautious when thinking about this and ensuring that we are actually designing instruction moving forward for a new world in which the 5-paragraph essay, copywriting, and other things are going to change pretty significantly. Even data analysis is changing, even with Code Interpreter on GPT-4. And so I think that there's something about this also, is that we have a responsibility. If we can build everyone's digital and AI literacy, the next responsibility is to completely reframe what school is. And I know that's a bit, we don't usually start there. And it's not something I go to a district and say, hey, you need to change all of your assessments and rethink this. But I do think that this is like the next stage, that the industrial model has not changed significantly for 250 years. We have no choice but to change. And there were some comments about going back to paper and pencil and oral exams, but that is only going to take you so far. And there's going to be more and more pressure from industry and change and from students themselves that are going to collapse that opportunity. And so it's a potential like reframing of like things to start to be protective. But we really need to think about, what does it mean to partner with generative AI? What does it mean to truly create? What does it mean to be like 21st century ready? And so I think that's going to be really interesting going forward. And to Tina's point, why did I start the organization? Is for exactly that reason. I joke about rubrics, but it's true. I really hated red rubrics, and that was the first prompt I ever did. But realistically, the moment I started this organization, the moment I did my first prompt, I'm not joking. At that moment, I don't know if it's like, having the crystallization, I realized two things immediately. One is that this was the transformational technology that we've been talking about since I've been alive. And it was going to be something that was set to personalized learning, to do so much that was possible. At the same time, I had an existential fear that we were not going to be able to adopt it as an education community, that it was going to be extremely hard to do for all kinds of reasons, including code fatigue. We're really risk averse, slow to change, but also technically we don't have as much skill as other industries. And we're also the last one that gets any support. Like, deep tech doesn't work in our world, guys. Like, we don't get, like, Sam Altman didn't create OpenAI because education would be better. In fact, he didn't do it at all around education. He had to go on a trip, and then someone said education was important. And I think that this is why we have to, like, really, that's why I started AI for Education, is like, that is the reason. Like, we have to not only create a space in which everyone has the same opportunity to learn and to take advantage of these tools, but we also should be the loudest people in the room when these big corporations who are making a ton of money off of us, that it has to be better, it has to be fit for purpose, it has to be safe, and it has to be responsible before we will buy it and use it. And I think that that's where, like, that's my soapbox for today. I'll come off of it. But I do think this is going to be a really, really fascinating time for us. And to wrap up, I mean, to be able to reconnect with someone that I absolutely enjoyed working with, but also really just admired and like think is such a great leader in STEM, to be able to come back around to this and have an opportunity to work with you, Karen, and share the Endeavor program, but also like the way you approach it has been really awesome. So just thank you so much for joining and being my colleague of 15 years. It's just really awesome to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been such a pleasure to have this important conversation, and awesome to reconnect. And we have some really fantastic participants tonight. So thank you for all of the work that you guys all do as educators. You're appreciated, and I know how hard you work for your students. And Amanda and team, thanks for all the hard work that you do every day to keep us thinking about this important topic.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for spending your evening, morning, middle of the night with us. We always have such a good time, and just appreciate y'all. You're doing the hard work. We're doing the, like, it's easier for us to sit here. You guys are doing the hard work. We appreciate you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and just really just appreciate all of you. So thank you all. And thank you, Karen. Bye, everybody.